So here's the bottom line up front. Get yourself some answer sheets, mock tests, and practice them timed. That's the way you ace the AFOQT. Listed on this screen are timestamps to help you focus on what's most important to you. Whether you're looking to start your AFOQT study off right, or you're taking this test for the last time, this video is to help maximize your study time. So here are the things that you need to prepare to study for this test. The answer sheet doesn't have to be fancy. You can Google Bubble Answer Sheet, that'll be sufficient. You can follow this link and download a specific AFOQT answer sheet that was made by a Reddit user, or you can buy a Scantron on Amazon. It really doesn't matter. What's important is that you have a dedicated answer sheet that you can fill out for mock tests. Speaking of mock tests, you'll definitely need at least one of those, but I recommend multiple. And beg, borrow, steal. Okay, don't steal, but get your hands on as many mock tests as you can. This will really help you out. Some ideas to get mock tests are through social media, like Facebook or Reddit. People who have taken the AFOQT recently and are done with their study material. That's a cheap way to get them. Library. That's the ultimate cheap way. Caveat with that, though, is make sure that you're getting the correct form, the correct version. We're on version T now. I went to the library here locally and saw something from 1993, so make sure you're getting the correct version. And a last note about the mock tests is now there are electronic versions available, actually study material fully electronic, and that's great, but just understand that unless you know 100% you are taking the AFOQT or the electronic version that is computer-based, you will be taking this test with pencil and paper, and you'll be using an actual test booklet. So I would recommend studying the way you're actually going to take the test, and that is via a paper book. So the next thing to think about is the time that you're going to dedicate to studying for this test. You need to make sure that it's consistent and that you do it on a regular basis. So once a day is probably too much, but once a week might be too little. So that's something that you'll think about, and we'll talk here in a minute on your own timeline, but you definitely need dedicated time to take this test and study. So something else you're going to want to do is read and review the rules. Now I have another video that goes over the rules of the AFOQT and its structure, but just keep in mind how you take this test is as important, if not more important, than the components of the test. And your number one thing, timing, but there's also some other factors such as what you can and can't write in. Spoiler alert, just the bubble in answer sheet, just as long as you bubble that in, and your scrap piece of paper. And also your breaks. Just make sure fatigue can become an issue in this test, so you want to adhere to all of the timing that you have for this test. So another common question that gets brought up is, how long do I need to study the AFOQT before I actually take the test? And that all depends on your situation. I've heard of people who have just taken it next day after they found out what it was. I definitely wouldn't recommend that. And as a matter of fact, at the Air Force Academy, it's almost a formality that you take this test. So I've heard of individuals at the Air Force Academy who did absolutely zero studying for it and just took it. On the other hand, I've heard of people who have spent 6+ months studying for this test. I think anecdotally, on average, online and people I've talked to, probably about 2 months average of what people will study before they take the test. For me personally, I studied for 3 months, and I would say I studied about 3 to 4 times a week. So it all depends on your situation. So let's talk about how to study now. In my opinion, there are 4 steps to maximize your studying efficiency for this test. Step 1, find your baseline. What I mean by this is, if at all possible, prog out 5-ish hours to take a mock test from beginning to end. And if you're going to do this, I recommend following what's on the screen right now, which is the official test and timing structure of the AFOQT on testing day. This will give you a sense of what kind of questions are on the test, and more importantly, how much time you have for each test. You want to establish this very early in your studying. Another component of these mock tests is that you want to replicate the testing conditions as much as you can, meaning no electronic devices unless you're using your phone for your timer. You've got your mock test, your answer sheet, your scrap paper, and your pencil. You're in a quiet place, secluded from others if possible, and you take that full amount of time and abide by the schedule there. This will get your brain to understand the fatigue that's going to happen with this test and the timing for each question, how quick you have to react and think through each component of the test. Now, I really want to emphasize here the component of time. If I haven't said it already, if you are not timing yourself, you are setting yourself up for failure on this test. Do not give yourself any leeway when it comes to setting your pencil down when the timer goes off for that subtest. So after you're done, go ahead and grade yourself if it's a gradable component and figure out which one of those subtests you scored the lowest on. And this will help you, ranking them from lowest score to highest score, to find your weaknesses and really right into the next step of how to study for this test. So now that you've taken the test and you understand what your weakest component is, we're going to attack it. So step 2, attack the weaknesses. So your weakest component doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a breadth of knowledge in that area. It could simply mean that your timing is not where it needs to be. So after you've listed your subtests in order from lowest score to highest score, we're going to attack that lowest score first. So forget about everything else below that line and spend most of your beginning study time just on that one component. So let's take arithmetic reasoning, for example. Let's say you've always been terrible at math and this is the one that you scored lowest on in your mock test. First, let's understand exactly what this subtest is evaluating. So you can find that out by any of the mock test book, the study material that you've bought. You can look it up online. I also have videos on that as well for each component. But really understand what they're evaluating you on. After you understand exactly what's being evaluated, then you want to figure out exactly how much time you have per question. Now, if your test booklet or study material doesn't give you this information, I've done the math for you, and that's on your screen now. So in our example, arithmetic reasoning, we know we have 10.5 seconds per question. So this is going to get your mind to start understanding whether you should continue thinking about a problem or you should skip it, depending on how long you're taking on that question. And this is one of the most fundamental parts of your studying. You are going to figure out, after you understand what it's evaluating and how much time you have per question, you're going to go online and you're going to figure out what study material best helps you in knowledge base of this subject. So for arithmetic reasoning, we're going to refresh ourselves on high school level math. So going to Khan Academy, looking up algebra, geometry, SAT, ACT study books. These will be valuable things in our study for arithmetic reasoning. Also, any kind of mental math problems that we can find online, maybe an app that gives you daily mental math problems, would also be beneficial in this case. And then from there, you just spend those first few lessons really deep diving into your weakest subject. So this next step, step 3, is what I call sharpen the saw. And basically what it means is, as we continue to refine that weakest subject, we can't neglect the others. So we'll spend the first few lessons on that weakest subject, and then we'll slowly, gradually start to incorporate the second weakest, the third weakest, as we go by. Now, this could be weeks that we do this in, or this could be days. It just depends on how much time you have until you have to take that AFOQT. So we'll go back to the formula that we had before for each subtest that we start to review. That is, research the topic. What are they evaluating? What are they asking you for? And then step 2, how much time per question do I have? Those are the 2 big components. Timing is such an important part of this test that you can raise your grade by not learning anything new on the subject simply by just answering the questions faster, of course, correctly. But if you up your timing game, that is an opportunity for you to get a higher score just in that regard. And the last component of this step is, at specific intervals, take mock tests. Continue to take these, what I call mini mock tests. You're not going to sit down for the full 5 hours and do it, but perhaps you take 3 subtests, or maybe your top 2 weakest ones, you take those once or twice a week. Now, like I said, this is all dependent on how much time you have left. I would say that maybe taking a mock test once a week is probably a good idea. So this will help you find the perfect blend between continuing to research and deep diving into all of these specific subtests, while also keeping the overall picture in mind of testing day and the fatigue that comes with that. So the last step I like to call study smart, and it's just a reiteration of what we've already been talking about. So number 1, make sure that every time you're practicing, you're being disciplined. When you take the mock test, you're simulating the environment with no electronics except for a timer, not putting stray marks in your test booklet or on your bubble sheet. Components like this will really help you on testing day. Another way to study SMART is just to continue to attack your weakest subtest. So those might change over time. If you've been studying for 3 months, your weakest subtest at the first month might actually be in the middle or one of your stronger ones by the time you get to your 3rd month. So continue to evolve with your knowledge base expanding. This also means focusing on the subtests that are important. Now what I mean by that is spending very little or no time on the subtests like situational judgment, self-description inventory, physical science. These either don't have a component score, composite score that helps any of the other scores that you have, or they have scores that you'll never be able to see. So just taking those tests as they are is what I recommend. Another point to emphasize to taking subtests that matter are if you're going non-rated or rated. Non-rated meaning everything that doesn't include aircrew, and rated meaning all the aircrew positions like pilot, CISO, air battle manager, RPA pilot. I recommend that you do some research or watch some videos on what components do incorporate the rated versus the non-rated. And if you're someone who's going non-rated, you don't want to focus on the subtests that are only for the rated positions. And the last and most important part of studying SMART is to time yourself. Do not give yourself any leeway. Be very disciplined with this. Always put the correct amount of time in there, and don't let yourself answer anything else once the timer goes off. Timing is a huge component of the test, probably more important than anything else. So always time yourself. So one point of note here that I'll say is, how do you interpret the scores that you make on your mock test to that of what you could possibly make on the AFOQT? And it's not an easy question to answer. So the real answer is there is no way to correlate the percentage that you make on the mock test to what your composite score could be on the AFOQT. There's simply too many variations of tests, and they're apples to oranges because they are not scored the same. I recommend if you want to go deep dive in that, just watch a video or do some research on how the AFOQT is scored. So a visual I can give you for this is if you make a 70% on one of your mock tests, that is not the same as making a 70% or a 70, I should say, on any component of the AFOQT. That is because the AFOQT is not based off a 0 to 100 percentage based system. It is a percentile based system, meaning if you make a 70, you scored as high or higher than 70% of the applicants. Whereas if you make a 70%, that has nothing to do with anyone else who took the test. So some of these subjects require their own video, and this video is already getting too long, so watch out for those. But I will say another common question is about the mock tests themselves. Which one's the best? What booklet do you want to go with? And look out for videos of my reviews on different test booklets, but they all have their pros and cons. So my recommendation would be get as many mock tests as you can from every different publisher, and that will help you get the understanding of what is probably going to be on the test. If you're ready to take this test, watch this video on what to expect during testing day. Thanks for watching.